Welcome to the Business of Cleaning. We're the podcast that brings cleaning expertise straight from the minds of professionals. For the month of December, we're going to focus on something extremely important in this industry, and that's employee retention and engagement. So keep listening, because you're going to want to hear this. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Business of Cleaning. My name is Haley Morris. I'm your podcast coordinator and host, and we are already into our fourth episode of our mini season. December is beginning to wrap up, and 2020 with it. With that being said, this mini season is targeted at bringing you interesting tips and tricks to increase engagement and retention within your workplace, to decrease turnover, and ultimately help you keep employees and spend less on recruitment cost and hiring. So this episode, I wanted to talk about being proactive about growth and change so that your employees will be too. And the reason I wanted to kind of bring up a little more vague of an episode is because a lot of us learned this year who is reactive and who is proactive. And it makes a large difference being proactive in your workplace, being proactive about your company, and really in any decisions we make in life versus being the type to just react. And coming with this, you want to make sure that you are in a place to respond appropriately when something happens. If you don't have things set up in place to respond to a situation, you are left with limited options. And sometimes one of those options or all of those options mean failure. And for 2020, we've seen a really, really dramatic side of that. But in any given year, failure within a company can mean its end. And that's the very dramatic worst situation. A lot of times, failure to respond appropriately can mean loss of staff, decreased morale, less engagement, and some other things that make it a really unpleasant place to work. And since we're trying to avoid that, I wanted to give you an episode on things to do to make you more proactive. So have in place a strong reporting system. And I think reporting is important on two phases. One, of course, is internally. You want to know what's going on. Employee retention and engagement, inventory, customer satisfaction, all of those things that you directly impact. But have a system set up in place to know what's going on, in the world around you as well. For example, there were some people who could see the effects of COVID drifting this way long before they hit us. Back in the November, December area, all the way in 2019, there was already a rise in this virus overseas in the Asian populations and spreading quickly. So some people were aware that it could hit us and that it could be bad. And they started to slowly think of, we need to talk about this with our team. Now, was anybody particularly proactive? I don't know. But what I can say is the people who thought about it in advance weren't shell-shocked for so long that they failed to actually be able to respond to the situation in a timely manner. They were able to pivot a little more quickly, get ahead of the game, and minimize their losses as soon as possible. And this is the biggest case scenario that we're hopefully going to see in the foreseeable future, but it is a great example. So that's one thing. Make sure that your reporting's in place. Know what's going on. Knowledge is power. If you know nothing about what's going on, you're always going to be just kind of blown out of the water when something happens, from big to small. So know what's going on as best as you can. Know what's going on in the world, know what's going on in your company, and constantly make adjustments in relation to that. Invest in trainings and educations. I've mentioned this before when prioritizing employees. Educations and trainings are vital. Enable your employees to do the same. Enable them to be able to respond and predict situations before they happen. And so maybe you missed something that could be very big, but your employees saw something that alarmed them, brought it to your attention. It starts a whole discussion, and you're able to make changes before anything actually spirals out of control. That could have been with COVID. Perhaps somebody said, listen, our first cases might have already hit because of travel here, here, and here, and this is what this virus looks like here. We need to start considering stocking up on materials, limiting contacts so that if the virus does hit, our employees are safe. Things like that, you might have been able to start to plan and implement ahead of time. And I know it's crazy, and there's still some things that we couldn't have predicted or really prepared for, but you could have, again, minimized your losses and been able to weather the storm just a little bit better. And that's given any kind of situations. For example, if a manager leaves, a huge manager, they've been there for 10 years, they have a large team under them, they're really great, and they just are irreplaceable, but suddenly they're gone. Family issues, whatever, they've had to separate their relationship with the company. That's a huge thing. But if you have employees trained, you have the proper education in place, you probably already have a good idea of who could potentially fill that spot, at least temporarily, and you can move things around so that you're not left scrambling, that you're not dropping jobs, that your quality doesn't dip and things like that, or if it does happen, again, it's minimized. Keep educated. This goes back to the externally based reporting and things like that. A large thing is keeping educated, knowing what's going on in the world. I can't say that enough. Locally, statewide, nationally, internationally, we are so easily impacted by what's going on in the world right now because travel is easy. Social media makes things accessible in seconds, if not less, from all the way across the world. And I know because I have chatted with somebody in Hong Kong recently and got to see how they're responding to COVID and what life is like there, just versus here. And literally seconds, I can see when she's responding to my message. And that's mind-blowing. So things happen very quickly. You kind of have to stay on top of it and know what's going on in the world because it can impact your business. If you're doing that, I would also advise share that information. Share those avenues with employees. Teach them how to use resources and stay on top of information. If that's a subscription, for example, I love the New York Times, and there might be a section in there that's beneficial for you to pay attention to in regards to your business. Maybe that's a subscription that you share with members of your team, and then you send out a report to everyone else with the highlights at the end of every week of what's going on. Keep it short so people actually read it, but actually share what's going on so people feel like they know, they feel empowered by their own knowledge, and they can maybe bring new ideas to the table as well. As part of a growth mindset, make sure you're growing all aspects of your business. Mentioned this with training and education a couple times, but don't just educate your leaders. Don't just train your leaders. Don't just create one type of training and expect it to work across the board or cover all your needs. Make sure your training is diverse and that reaches a diverse set of people. Focus in on where you have the most opportunity for growth, yes, but also make sure that the growth is continuous across the board. If that's cleaning trainings for your frontline workers, maybe that's even industry training for those frontline workers. Things like that could go a long way in helping the business grow as a whole and lifting up the entire unit. Again, raise the standard for the cleaning industry means raising your entire business, not just your leaders. You don't want to create more of a gap. Spotlight accomplishments. Part of growing and part of creating positive environments around change and initiatives and decision making is acknowledging the good when it happens. And so feedback, reporting, all of this stuff is really great, but highlight the small and big things that happen that are positive steps towards your goals. It helps people know what to continue doing or what they can continue to improve on, and it helps them feel appreciated and want to do their job more. So remember, if you want to actually be in a place to respond to a situation, you have to be proactive. You have to do your work and research in advance to get there later. And that's it for my episode 4. We'll see you next week for the last episode of the Business in Cleaning, and thank you for tuning in.